Thank you for joining us today. I'm Paul Baumann, and I'm honored to serve as the president of the Rotary Club of Tulsa this year. Our startup Rotary Committee continues to meet and discuss the best time for us to return to in-person meetings, and we remain hopeful and encouraged as we see the numbers of COVID cases decline. Until we can meet again in person, we continue with our excellent programs via Zoom, and today our program committee is another lined up great program for us. As we move towards a more normal, I know that when we return to our own in-person meetings, that our club will need to continue to modify and improve our meeting and membership experience for all of our members and prospective members that we have. It also gives me great comfort when I think about the members within our club and how outstanding you all are. You're not only giants in your own endeavors outside of Rotary, but within the Rotary world, you're also giants. I oftentimes feel like the coach who looks around the locker room at the players on the team, and they think that we have all these great players on my team, and how can we do anything but overcome and not only survive but thrive. You all continue to amaze me at your daily life. You live out the Rotary motto of service above self. And to borrow a famous quote, if I may, ask not what Rotary can do for you, but ask what you can do for Rotary. And this, my friends, is what I see in you each and every day. Members of our outstanding club living out on a daily basis. So thank you for all you do, each one of you. Now, please help me welcome our Rotarian of the day, Barbara Krogerman. Barbara. There she's on.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me? You can hear me? Is your answer? Nodding yes. Okay. Well,
Yes.
Thank you very much. I would like to introduce my friend Basil Boz as the most interesting man in the world, but that would trivialize the profoundly critical nature of what he's chosen to do as his life's work. And that's the recovery of kidnapped American children from wherever in the world they have been taken to. And sometimes they're being sexually exploited, but he will return them safely to their parents or their custodial parent. When every local, state, federal resource has been exhausted, once they accept the case, Boz and the organization he's founded, the Association for the Recovery of Children, along with a network of international dedicated warriors, they will step in to recover that child. And they will never charge the custodial parent one dime. But to recover that child, think what that means. They have to locate that child. And many times this is a very underground kind of a thing. It's not easy to locate the child. Then they must safely obtain the child, physically rescue that child. Then they have to find a way to extricate that child out of that situation, that country, sometimes it's other countries, safely and legally, and return that child safely to his or her parents or custodial parent. I just referred to Boz as a warrior, and indeed he is. He is a graduate of the Citadel. He is a Marine, a former Marine who was recruited into the CIA as special ops kind of a guy. And it was on one of those operations, and that was in Mogadishu, where he basically discovered his life's work, where he observed two young girls who were obviously in peril and found a way to rescue not only those two girls, but their mother and their brother. And this story and a lot of other very harrowing stories are told in his latest book, which is called Something Bigger Than Overthrowing Small Governments. In addition to his life-saving work, Boz is also an author, a playwright, a speaker, a life coach, and did I mention actor? If you're a fan of TV's The Blacklist, you would recognize Boz because he played, well, Boz. He basically played himself as the commander of a paramilitary unit. And he played a similar role in Persons of Interest. I think he's got that part down pat. Boz is now offering training camps for individuals who would like to work with him to combat the tragedy of child abduction, child sexual exploitation, which sadly we in Tulsa have not escaped. So it gives me great pleasure, his friend and fellow Templar, and I still say he's the most interesting man in the world, if I may, Basil Boz.
Great. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with all 54 of you here today. Thank you. Bill Kogerman, it's good to see you, sir. Barbara, great for the introduction. Thank you. It's been a while since I've been face to face. And so I thank you for having me here. Tina, thank you for assisting with the slideshow today. I won't take up too much of your time, but I am the founder of the Association for the Recovery of Children. And Barbara, thank you for that really wonderful introduction. I think that it suffices to say that the credit goes to more than just myself. It goes to our staff, other operators, and a number of NGOs that help us from time to time. We are the oldest running non-government organization, child rescue organization in the United States, or one of them, founded in 1993. So we'll jump into that. Tina, if you could throw up the first title slide there. I'm not actually able to see anything on this end to know where we are with that. Let's see, here we go, it's perfect. So where did it all begin for the Association for the Recovery of Children? Tina, if you'll hit the next slide, that'd be great, thank you. How many of you remember a movie or seeing a movie called Black Hawk Down? And how many of you knew that in the real events that were taking place, that there were already CIA special operations teams along with center spike teams on the ground way before conventional military forces arrived, and sadly, before this incident happened to some of our colleagues. Next slide, please, Tina. It was in 1993 with the rescue of two little girls who were born to an Italian father, who I suspect probably had a family in Italy and a family in Mogadishu, Somalia. This was our team on the ground here. That was when my much younger days there, when I didn't have gray hair, but I can still wear a vest about that size, I think. And a Marine Corps detachment and some center spike, which center spike, for many of you that may have a military background, that comes out of kind of the Delta Force community. So this was our team on the ground. Next slide, please, Tina. When the Civil War had broken out in Mogadishu, Somalia, basically the father abandoned his family there. And in the midst of that turmoil, we chose to do something about it and rescue the two girls that you see here in the green t-shirts and place them in an orphanage that miraculously kind of sprung up in the middle of all of that fighting. Later, after we returned them to the orphanage, they asked that we go find their mother and their little brother, which would be this lady to the right here from Somalia. And we went back out in the refugee camps and found them and kind of reunited them. The lady on the left in the red t-shirt was a woman from America that had bravely gone into the war zone to open that orphanage. So I'm not really sure where she is now, but we always salute her for her bravery and her willingness to get in there and actually start this orphanage, which at the time when we delivered these two little girls had about 230, 250 homeless children that were refugees of the war. And we cut a deal with her because she really wouldn't take this family initially because they just didn't have enough food to go around. So much credit to our center spike guys. They were able to acquire enough food and medical supplies to sustain that orphanage while we were all there during the war. Down in the left bottom here on the photograph, that is where we found the two little girls initially hiding underneath some debris. So after we did that and rescued those kids, I got to thinking there must be something bigger than overthrowing small governments. Next slide, please. And so it began for the Association for the Recovery of Children. I came back to the United States and found out that there were approximately 250,000 children missing in the United States, American children, in 1993. Because of jurisdictional issues, communication problems between law enforcement, budgetary constraints between law enforcement, nothing was being done to recover missing and exploited American children. And in fact, they were the last on the list. Homicides, car theft, blue collar crimes, bank robberies, whatever it may be, everything had a priority except for rescuing missing and exploited American children. And so it was really difficult for me to turn a blind eye to those sort of circumstances in our own country. And so I formed the Association for the Recovery of Children, which is a 501c3 organization of former intelligence, military, and law enforcement officers who are dedicated to the recovery of missing and exploited American children. Once all local, state, and federal law enforcement efforts have been exhausted, we get involved. Oftentimes that will take us into the backyard of MS-13 or the drug cartels or the Bloods and the Crips or wherever the FBI or other law enforcement agencies do not want to go, so to speak. Donations finance our missions, allowing us to do this at absolutely, as Barbara said, no cost to the custodial guardians and with no paycheck in our pocket. We do this, ladies and gentlemen, and please hear me. We do this because it's the right thing to do. And in our country today, it's very rare that people do things because it is the right thing to do. So as I continue with my presentation, please let that resonate in your head. No matter what you do in your life, in your business, no matter what you do to save American children or feed the poor, or whatever it may be, do it because it is the right thing to do. Next slide, please. Thus far, we've been blessed to have a 100% success rate. And at every child that we've gone after, we've safely returned them home on domestic or foreign soil. Now, there are much finer men than myself in this fight. And I'm honored to be here with all of you, as I said earlier, but those who really deserve the credit for all of this are people like my parents and my family, the men and women of ARC, and a very big God who keeps us safe on every dangerous assignment. So what do some of those assignments look like, you might ask? Please, next slide, please. This is one case involving a little girl named Willow Brad Feud. On the left here, you'll see a little girl holding some flowers, myself, a guy in a gray shirt, Dad Turner, former Navy SEAL, and the top row involves a number of former Mexican special forces, and the guy on the far right, Kurt, is a U.S. citizen that was with Eagle Eye Security that helped us on this operation. And on a given day and time, this little girl was abducted by her mother, who had just gotten out of prison in the United States, along with a former cartel guy. And they kidnapped Willow from Killeen, Texas, and took her into Mexico and threatened to sell her into prostitution if their demands were not met. They were demanding $50,000 from Willow's custodial father and her grandparents. Now, this is a family of plumbers in Killeen, Texas, that $50,000 a year was what they made, basically. And so the family actually reached out to local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies who all decided on that day not to assist. And here's why. Because the father, when he was 16 years old, had gotten drunk, had tried to outrace the police, and had a record. Typical thing a 16-year-old might do, but he had a record and he was blemished. And so nobody was going to help him. Even if it meant saving his little daughter's life, they weren't going to help him. So when the mother decided that she was going to sell the daughter into prostitution is when ARC got involved. And of course, when nobody else wanted to be involved. So we set up a command station in Killeen, Texas, and negotiated for many, many days with the kidnappers until we were able to get down to a reasonable amount of money. And then we launched a team into Mexico. While we were negotiating from a hotel in Mexico, the perpetrators or the kidnappers kept jockeying back and forth and changing their demands. You know, we want 15,000, now we want 50, now we want 100,000, and we're not going to meet you where you want us to meet you. And so we had to end up playing a few cards that we don't want to play. And one of those was on the phone just saying, guess what? Then you just keep the girl. You just sell her into prostitution. You just do whatever you want to do. And we'll just turn this over to Interpol and they'll hunt you down no matter where you go in the world. And in the background, you could hear the mother screaming, no, we want the money. We want the money. Her own mother. The same kind of mom that I had been told just 15 years previous in our country that no mother would ever sell her daughter. And yet, as of today, we find that happening almost every single day here in America. 2019, 421,000 plus American children missing in the United States, some sold by their parents into sex trafficking right in our own backyard. So we started renegotiating with them and they still kept jockeying around until we thought we were actually going to lose the operation. And I got to praying about it and I said, "Your God, please help me be creative. What can I do?" And I remember saying to the cartel guy, I said, "I want you to go look out your window." And so you can hear his footsteps slowly walking over to the window. And then about 3 seconds later, you hear his footsteps running back to the phone and he goes, "Senor, we will meet you." Now, I have absolutely no idea what he saw out that window, but whatever it was convincing enough for them to meet us. We played the bluff. Of course, we met. For those who have been in Mexico or Mexico City, you know, there is this place. It's kind of a Vatican Square looking place. It has 3 big churches in it, a modern church and 2 old chapels. And that is where we actually met and we did the exchange for Willow Brad feud. And as I met the cartel guy in the back of the church where we exchanged the money, we made it very clear that we had shooters in place and that if anything went wrong, his life was on the line. We marched across that big Vatican Square, and much to my surprise and much to my delight, Thad Turner and a number of our team members were already standing behind the bad guys. And of course, Willow Bradfeud, I got down on my knees. She came to me. I said, "Willow, your father has sent us to get you back to America. Are you ready to go home?" And she said, "Yes, sir." So we took her back to the American Embassy. That in itself is a story of length. Got her passport, got her on the airplane, flying her back to the United States. And the pilot of the plane was kind enough to announce over the announcement, we want to welcome, we want to welcome Willow Bradford back to the United States of America. And so we got back, and as you see in the picture below, there was a welcoming committee in Killeen, Texas for Willow. People had been praying for her and hoping that she would get back, because on any other day, this little 7-year-old girl would now have been spending the rest of her life in Mexico being prostituted and possibly not even alive. So let's look to the next slide, Tina, please. This is a case involving a girl named Nikki. And sadly, what I share with you is not necessarily a success. Even though we were able to be a part of her life and getting her out of what they call the life, this young girl, on the last day that we met with her, believed that her kidnappers, the perpetrators, the people that had prostituted her and trafficked her, were the only people that loved her. Now, this is a girl that was sold into the trafficking world at age 6 or 7 by her mother and her father out of the state of Florida. And during her time when she sought refuge and finally was able to break away at a later in her teens, she managed to go to a church, a large church. And there she met a female youth pastor, thinking that she could finally get out of the life. And on a given night, the youth pastor invited her over to come over with a lot of different girls to have a pajama party, a sleepover, as would probably be common with any church youth group. But on this night, there was nobody there but her and the youth pastor. And she was so naive and so young, even though she had been trafficked and horrible things had happened to her, anything that you can think of, from waterboarding to being branded to being identified with a GPS tracker, to having her back covered in scars from being whipped. She trusted the youth pastor, and the youth pastor said, well, don't worry about it. We'll have our own gathering here. Why don't you go in the bedroom and change? And so she did. What she didn't notice was on the outside of that door was a lock. And when she went in, the youth pastor locked her in the bedroom. Some minutes later, that door opened, and in came the youth pastor along with a police officer. And they brutally raped her for the next 4 hours. They made her submit into a trafficking order that they managed and handled to the last day when we actually met with her. Now, I tell you that because trafficking runs rampant in the ranks of law enforcement now. Corruption is at the highest levels of our government and sometimes our corporate entities. There is nobody immune. Doctors, pastors, lawyers, school teachers, and the list goes on and on and on when it comes to the trafficking of children in our country today. So, how did this story end? Nikki went away to go back to be with her perpetrators. She had been willing to testify against them. And they were aware that she was willing to testify against them. And a 93-page intelligence report went from ART to the Department of Justice and went down to the integrity unit of that law enforcement agency. And they blew everybody's cover. And they told the perpetrators what was going to happen. And so on a certain day, we had another asset that called us up and said, hey, I had just been flown down to Texas by the FBI. They picked me up in a nondescript car. They took me to a nondescript building, took me to a nondescript room, and in there were 4 bad body bags. And when they unzipped those body bags, it was Nikki's body. She had been hacked up into so many pieces. But she was able to identify her from her tattoo and half of her face and whatever it may be. And then those FBI agents started interrogating the asset. Unfortunately, the asset was smart enough to say, look, people know where I am. I have a mission trip to go on to Costa Rica tomorrow. I need to get back. And so they put her on an airplane and they flew her back. She called us. We called the FBI. The FBI said, we didn't fly anybody anywhere. We don't know anything about this, which our FBI contacts was true. So ask yourself the question, who is it that is so powerful that they can literally pose to be the FBI? They can run around a certain part of Texas with no license plates and never be pulled over, can do all of this and actually target Nikki and hack her up into pieces and get away with it. And in addition to this, how about this? When we went to check the flight records to see if she had been flown down there, everything on her flight log had been erased, as if she had never been on the airplane. Who is that powerful in the United States where they can have a witness disposal program and cover up like that? Somebody is. So these are the things that we deal with on a daily basis, just not the pimp that is trafficking someone on the corner of 15th and Divine, but it has become such a lucrative business model in America that everybody is getting on it, and it's very, very sophisticated. I think if you take a look just at the last number of years where certain officials in our country have gotten away with maybe murder, but they've never been held accountable for it, that in itself speaks to how powerful it is and how they can cover up for anything and everything. And sadly, in Nikki's case, she's not with us. And I can't say that that was a success for us, but we learned a lot from it. Next slide, please. So the protection of all of Americans' children, it's our duty. It's just not my duty with the Association for the Recovery of Children. It's your duty as well. And the hearing of the reading of this whole trafficking issue may be useful, but if men and women rest in hearing and praying as so many do, it's as if a tree should value itself for being watered and putting forth leaves and yet never producing any fruit. The fact is, a child does not come home until there are boots on the ground that pull them from the evil and physically bring them home. Next slide, please. Now, most people spend a lifetime wondering if they've made a difference. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't have that problem. And I don't want you to have that problem either after we meet here today. When it comes to rescuing children in America, it's simply stated, if we do not, who will? That's it. If we do not, who will? If you do not, who will? Do you think somebody else is doing it in your backyard, in your neighborhood? Look, we're one organization and we're not that big. And maybe one day someone will drop $100 million in our bank account for sustainable funding, and we'll turn it over to Edward Jones and say, make that make money for us. And maybe we'll start raking in 200 kids a month. But until that happens, we're just one entity. So if you do not, and we do not, ask yourself, who will? Next slide, please. I want you to make no doubt about it, as I speak with you here today, that these are God's children, and he's speaking to each and every one of us in a world of unprecedented evil that's out to destroy children in America. And if we allow our children to exist in a dysfunctional environment, then they're going to grow up to be dysfunctional adults. And we have to ask ourselves, is that who we want running the country? Is that what we want to leave for our children? Lord knows it's dysfunctional enough as it is with all the riots and all the stuff we saw this last year. So add on to that the billions of dollars that are made for selling children. And every time I hear the issue about people being enslaved, everybody's been enslaved. But even more now, we have more slavery of children and more slavery in America than we had 150 years ago. And it doesn't matter what color it is, because when we go to rescue these kids, they're of every color you can think of, but they're enslaved and they're drugged and they're prostituted and they're raped every single day. Next slide, please. So let me ask you a question, if I may be very frank. I'd like you to think about this. How do you murder a child without killing them? How do you murder a child without killing them? The answer is you sexually exploit them. There's a spiritual component in every human being, and it's called the soul. And when children are trafficked, molested, abused, exploited, their soul is ripped from their very being. And each of you knows that to be true. Because take a moment and look inside yourself. We were all children at one time. And if we were still children in that situation, would you not want to know that someone is going to come save you? Someone every day. Would you hope that someone would come save you? Next slide, please. Therefore, I implore you not to shy away from your duties to prevent our children from being exploited. Whether you physically do it yourself, whether you come to a 5-day training program and learn how to start your own NGO and go save children, whether you donate to your choice of an organization that's doing what they say they're doing. And by the way, just let me touch on this. About 80% of the NGOs out there that claim to be doing something for children aren't doing it. They have great marketing plans. They make great paychecks, but there's no oversight. And we who get to look behind the veil get to know who they are. And that's why our strategic partner list is very short here in America. So no matter where you choose to give your money to, make sure you vet them to understand that they're doing what they say they're doing. And my father said, there's only 2 types of people in this world. There's followers and there's leaders. That's it. And I'd like to think that the people I'm addressing today in Rotary are all leaders. People ready to say that now that I know about this, this is not going to happen on my watch. If there is one thing I can do before I leave this earth, I'm going to make sure I save one child. I'm going to stop this heinous crime, worse than anything else in America, because I can do something about this. Next slide, please. Now, I know that there are probably some of you sitting out here listening to this presentation, that are saying, well, that's easy for you to do, Mr. CIA Special Operations guy, because you're trained. Okay, Spanky, let me tell you something. You and I have one thing in common, and it's the most important thing. Every one of us on this call today, we both have 24 hours in a day. So what are you doing with yours? What are you doing with yours? Next slide, please. Look, if I have 99 cents in my pocket and I take it to the bank and I ask them to give me $1, will they do that? Of course not. Why? Because I'm 1 penny short. It's that 1 penny. It's that 1 penny that completes $1. The 1 penny is actually the most valuable part. And without it, we're financially incomplete. So for all of you that are listening right now that may feel that, well, if I get into this, I'm going to be alone in this fight. I want you to realize that you just might be that 1 penny. The most important part, and it may very well be you, that completes the efforts of an NGO like ourselves is struggling to win the war against trafficking. Never forget this. One man or one woman with courage is a majority. One man or one woman with courage is a majority. Don't wait for somebody else to do it. You don't need it. You don't need an army. Heck, when I used to get sent behind the lines in special operations in the CIA, sometimes we went with 2 people. We overthrew a whole government with 4 people in a hotel room. So you may be looking to get the backing of 1,000 people. You and Rotary may think, well, we need another Rotary from this place and this place and this place to start a program to go rescue children. No, you don't. You just need to be brave. You need to see that it's worth the fight. And you need to understand the value of life, that these are innocent children. And without you, they die. Next slide, please. Now, I've been in this war for 27 years plus now. And in one day, after seeing probably much of the ugly side of trafficking of children that I could, just like I saw all of that devastation in Mogadishu, Somalia in 1993, I paddled out on my board there in Southern California. And as the sun was setting on the horizon and the new moon crested the heavens, I looked up and I said, dear God, why are you not doing something about this? And it's clear as day, just like in 1993, he said, I am. I created you. So I tell you the same. He is doing something about this. He created each and every one of you. Never forget that. May God bless each of you. May God bless our great country, the United States of America. Thank you for having me today.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. This is an opportunity for some questions and answers, and I'd like to start out. What you do is so clandestine. How do parents who've had a child missing, abducted, and all those other resources have been exhausted, how do they know who you are and contact you? How does that connection get made?
That's a very good question, Barbara. Law enforcement know us well. Our website knows us well. Most parents that are dealing with this issue go online and they pull up a number of websites on various organizations. They are free to call us. We're so well known, kind of under the radar now, that people lead people to us. We currently are working on 10 cases as of today. Now, when it comes to how we operate clandestinely, that's our tradecraft. What we don't do is we don't disclose our tradecraft. When we run an operation, nobody knows we're running it, how we're running it, when we launch that operation. So we've managed to keep a very nice firewall between who we are and allowing people to know what we do. We have a great relationship with the Department of Justice that recently went all the way to Attorney General Barr's office. And over the course of time, because of the number of law enforcement officers, not to mention because I'm an adjunct professor for the FBI, they come to know it that way as well. They turn to us for a lot of these cases. So the problem is the trafficking problem is so large now. And I think people are aware of that. And this is one of the reasons why our 5-day course is an equipping course. It's not an awareness course. We teach people how to actually go create an NGO and actually operationally go out, study tradecraft, learn tradecraft, and actually go rescue a kid. We teach them things that most of the time they don't even know what they can do or can't do. Most people in America don't know that you can make a citizen's arrest. Most people don't know that you can actually, if you think a crime's being committed in a house, that you can kick a door in. And now, let me make this clear. We don't carry weapons with us. If we're running an operation in Syria to go rescue some kids that are kidnapped by ISIS, that's a whole different ballgame. But in the United States, we've never carried any weapons with us. So we're not cowboys. We use a lot of tradecraft to look for a window of opportunity. We coordinate with law enforcement on a regular basis until law enforcement basically says, no, you guys go do this, please go ahead and do it. So that's kind of a little bit longer answer, Barbara, probably for that, but that's how people find us.
You've raised awareness here, and we're becoming aware of what a horrendous situation is out there. And you've urged us to become involved, not just sit back. And Rotary, we're people who believe in service. I'm unclear about what the guy who runs his own business or the retired person or whatever, what they can do to make a difference. How can they help you to do something in this battle?
Well, there's a number of ways. Thank you for asking that question, Barbara. I would be remiss in my duties if I didn't say finances always help. Look, we can't get on an airplane for free. Nobody gives us free tickets. We don't stay in hotels. Most of the time we're running surveillance out of a garbage can someplace. And anybody that is staying in a 5-star hotel when they're running operations, you should be very suspect of that, because that's not where the traffic victims are. They're in the dirt, they're in the streets, they're in the houses being held. So you can donate. If you go to www.recoverychildren.org, that's our website. We're always accepting donations, which helps us operationals. No one gets a paycheck. So we have an accounting firm that monitors all of that, because obviously as a 501c3, we're responsible to the IRS. So every single penny goes into operations on our end. That's not the same with all NGOs. They choose to run theirs one way. We run ours a different way. In addition to that, Rotary is already involved in the trafficking arena. Let me think of her name, Tina. Cosette. Barbara, do you know Cosette?
No, unfortunately, I don't.
Well, we're going to connect you guys. I'll get her name for you, but there's a part of Rotary in Southern California. One Rotary group actually has chosen to take on the anti-trafficking or human trafficking. Cosette Vergardi. I'm sorry, but I'll send that to you, Barbara.
Oh, thank you.
I would say that your Rotary should have a conversation with them and see if you can combine efforts. She's doing a great job. We've actually met with her before with Department of Homeland Security in Long Beach, and had extensive conversations early on out the gate how Rotary could be involved in a lot of these efforts. And that'll probably answer that. On an individual basis, here's what I would tell people that think they want to get involved on the ground level. And we have people that call me up literally every week and say, how can I be of service? You know your life better than I know your life. You know your business better than I know your business. The best way for me to answer that is to say, get online, come to one of our 5-day equipping courses and understand the AO, the area of operation. everything it takes to rescue a kid. You're going to know where you fit in best once you learn that. For me to try to give you a simple answer as to, well, you should do this or do that, it may not fit in with your lifestyle. And I can't tell you how to do that until you understand what you're dealing with. No different than if you were to go to any corporation and say, you know what, I don't want to do an internship here at McDonnell Douglas. HR would probably say, and I don't know this for a fact, but most likely would say, well, you know what? During your next 5 weeks here, you're going to learn in your internship what we do at McDonnell Douglas. And if it looks like it's a good fit for you, then we're welcome to have you on board. Okay. But you're not going to know that because you know how much school you have, you know your work schedule, you know your family situation, you know all those things. But until you sit there for 5 weeks at McDonnell Douglas, you're never going to know if you want a career with McDonnell Douglas. Well, that's the same with us. We've realized that too often in America, people have given people simple answers like, well, be aware, or look for this, or look for that. That doesn't save a kid. And so what happens is people give it their best shot. They fall short, they fall on their sword, they get discouraged because no one showed them what the area of operation was really all about, what's going to be expected of them. And then we just wasted time, energy, and money and people, and they just don't do it. Now, I will tell you this, it doesn't matter what your age is. Not at all. We've got teenagers that are involved in anti-trafficking, and I've got operators that are up in their 80s that are involved in anti-trafficking. Once you learn the AO, you may be surprised at exactly what you can and cannot do. So we welcome everybody. And until we get everybody, we're going to have a problem because there's not enough law enforcement to go out there. It's not enough faith-based communities, not enough anybody to actually go out there and save the lives of children.
I'm curious about something. I know there's so many phases to what you have to do to rescue a child. There's locating the child in the first place in some very dangerous situations. And what is the most challenging aspect of that whole process?
Wow, that's a great question. I think the most challenging part is making sure that the child is even alive. Once we start gathering the intelligence and then do the contextual analysis, one of the first things we have to do is determine, are they even alive? The second thing is understanding what environment they're in. It's a difference between rescuing a child that's being held by one perpetrator and a child that's being held by 13 gang members who are all armed. Two different operational settings, basically. But the most challenging part out of all of that is getting the justice system to do its job. We do a rescue, perpetrator is captured, and he's out on the streets in 3 months. We see this all the time. No justice is being served. The penalty for abusing children isn't strict enough. Now, for many of you, I'll say this, you may not agree with me, but I've been doing this a long time. And every single perpetrator that I've had a chance to interview, I've asked them, I've said, what's the one thing that would have deterred you from molesting that 5-year-old boy or that 3-year-old girl or whatever it is? And every single one has said, if I thought I was going to get the death penalty, I probably wouldn't have done it. Now, I'm going to tell you something. I'm very frank about this, and unashamedly, I say this. After being downrange in this mess that we have in our society, you sexually exploit a child, you deserve the death penalty. It is the most horrendous of crimes I have ever seen. To watch a child go from age 4 to age 24 and die every single day. Unless you have been trafficked, you can't even imagine the horrific things that perpetrators do to children for sexual exploitation. Imagine this. You're 7 years old and you're raped 20 times a day. You're stuck in a closet. You're burned with cigarettes. You're put on fentanyl or meth so that you can perform, so that you, whatever it may be. You're put in a trunk and carried from one state to the other. You're beaten. You're hardly ever fed. Sometimes you're chained to a bed. Things that we only think we would see in movies, and yet it happens every single day. And yet, once all of that is disclosed in a court of law, we've got judges that let people out over that. Something's wrong with our system. So if you're on here and you're a judge or you're an attorney and that comes to your court, I would hope that that would not be the story on that day in your court of law, because it's really, really bad. And so our penalties, the injustice, Barbara, is done in our judicial system. The penalties are not stiff enough because no one's afraid anymore of what they can get away with. Heck, you guys know this, live in California. Look at the DA in LA. Look at all the people that are letting out of jail. Look at things. Rape is not even considered a violent crime any longer at the DA's office. So our society is so far upside down that we've got to kind of right the ship if we want this problem to go away. If we really care for our children, if we really care for our society, we'll do something about that.
I have a question.
Yes, sir. Yeah, Jerry.
Okay. When you have a child into your care and your protection and you cannot find their family, what happens? Do you have an adoption agency that can work alongside you to provide that child a loving family under these dire circumstances?
Yeah, what'll happen is if we know that ahead of time, we'll go ahead and try to make arrangements with CPS or after strategic partners that are what we call aftercare. Okay, so these are people that can actually help the child. They're schooled and how to restore their health, both medically, physically, mentally, and kind of find them what we call placement until something opens up where they can be placed. Foster care system is still available, but even the foster care system, there's trafficking in the foster care system now. So sometimes, and that's a sad part, Jerry, is that they have nowhere to go back to. They have nowhere. And so we put them in the best care state. So the state sometimes takes them, sometimes private organizations can take them. Adoption is, we hear people talk about adopting a lot, and mostly in the faith-based community, people go, wow, I'll adopt that kid. But in all reality, it's a handful. We don't recommend it. Yeah, it's not like adopting a child just right out of an orphanage that's never had abuse. It's a lot. So we're always looking for better aftercare places. You know, we're looking for some place that can take, and it's always a good question. What happens to the kids that don't have anywhere to go back to? Is CPS the best place for them? Is the state the best place for them? Could I create a place that would be better for them? Could Rotary create a place that would be better for them? Absolutely, probably. You know, if an organization like yourself or you as an individual came alongside with people like us that have been downrange, that can school you so that you know what to look for, you'd probably never be blindsided, and you could possibly have the best aftercare facility in the United States, you know. And we're always looking for that, and people are striving for that constantly.
Work you're doing for us and also for the children. I think someone summed it up in the chat box. They said they don't have adequate words to thank you with for what you're doing. So thank you again. Now for our inspirational moment from Corey Nickerson. Corey, good luck following this presentation, but it's been an inspirational presentation for sure. Corey?
I'm here, Paul. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, my inspirational moment took a 90-degree turn after we got into this meeting. I was going to start the inspirational moment with a humorous story. And humor in me right at the moment. Part of what I was wanting to talk about was the whole process of communication. The current daily communication that bombards us from so many arenas in the 21st century seems to be one of little bits of information from one side and then another side assuming they've got all of the facts when they react or respond to that information. That's one of the reasons I'm proud to be a Rotarian. As global Rotarians, we come together from different ethnicities, different backgrounds, different religions, and different political views in order to serve the hurting people of our world. And I think sometimes the greatest tool we have in Rotary is our individual abilities to communicate across lines that would have a tendency to divide us. There was an article in the May 2017 issue of the Rotarian magazine, and I'm quoting from author Steve Almond. He says, "Real courage lies in the willingness to challenge your own views, to seek out and accommodate new information and perspectives. Otherwise, you don't have a belief system, you have a dogma. The second rule is to strive for understanding rather than victory. We have to stop regarding those who hold opposing views as enemies to be vanquished. Instead, the matrix whose experiences have led them to a different set of conclusions. What this requires more than anything is the willingness to quiet our own rhetoric, ask questions, and listen. By ask questions, I do not mean those leading questions intended to trap the other person. I don't even mean questions about where someone acquired their statistics or quotes. I mean questions about how and why the person developed his or her beliefs. The goal should be to understand where someone is coming from. You don't have to agree with their views, but you should at least have some sense of how they got there." End of quote. And I think in this Rotary world and in light of what we've just heard, there's such an opportunity to be a better person with each other than we can possibly be on our own. And I think that's the part of Rotary that I so admire. It's the ability that you as Rotarians offer your strengths and make me a better person. And I hope that my strengths do the same for you. I miss our in-person meetings and our up-close conversations. And I think this meeting today is a real dramatic pose or position of that same thing. Because at the end of this particular meeting, if we were all meeting down at the church, we'd all be gathered in groups and probably be around for another hour trying to figure out, okay, how do we fit? How do we work within this? But we're not able to do that. And for the sake of protecting stay at a distance for a while, but we'll be back together when the time is right. I'm getting a message that my internet connection is unstable. So I just want you all to know that I'm with you. Thank you, Boz, for your particular input today. And to each of you as Rotarians, have a blessed day. Have an incredible but thoughtful week. Back to you, President Paul.
Thank you, Past President Corey. I do want to say a special thanks to our meeting sponsors this week: Spirit Bank, Rhonda Hayes, TC Blair, Gable Gottwalls, Jeff Hassel, John Dale, Paul Rossler, Greater Tulsa Reporter, Forrest Cameron, Small and Associates Financial, Chris McCune, Corporate Realty Advisors, Carl Vincent. Join us March 10th for our next speaker, Kristen Hutto from the Tulsa Farmers Market. And after I adjourn the meeting today, we're going to have some breakout rooms. So those of you that can stay around, please do. With that, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you for joining us. We're adjourned.